Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to another Friday edition of To The Point podcast. Hope you guys are all doing well. A lot happening in the world of sports. I did a few different things this week. March Madness coverage. Did our normal Tuesday show with Shay. So this morning we're going to get to a lot of things. Cover a lot of stuff from the NHL this week. Obviously, a few teams have been idle with different schedules. We saw the Winnipeg Jets, Edmonton Oilers play a lot of games this week. The Central Division is becoming more and more interesting. The log jam in the East, and then the firing of Ralph Kruger. And I'll touch on the Buffalo Sabres and where they're headed after 13 straight losses. But we're going to start today talking about some major NFL headlines. And, in the NFL, if you don't got a quarterback, you don't get a chance to win. And I'm going to start with the Chicago Bears. The Chicago Bears have been an organization that has lacked an elite quarterback for over 50 years. Again, I'm only 22, but I can do research and I can go back and look. And the Bears won a Super Bowl in 1985. They had Jim McMahon at quarterback. I think if you ask the majority of the people that were there, Jim McMahon was an okay quarterback. I would correlate him to Trent Dilfer in the 2000 Ravens. Trent Dilfer was not an elite quarterback, but he had an elite defense. If you look at last season, I don't think Tom Brady was an elite quarterback last year, but he had a terrific defense around it. I'm not saying the same, but I'm just saying you can have mediocre quarterback play if you have elite defenses, which the Bears did. But the game is changing in the NFL. Pass rushing, but pass rush is still so important. You need good offensive line play, but if you don't have elite to very good quarterback play, you don't have a chance in hell of winning. So Chicago Bears, this all starts in 2017, where they trade up. They trade away 2 first-round picks, 2 players to get the second pick in the draft. Okay, who are they going to take? They pick Mitch Trubisky out of North Carolina. A 1-year starter for North Carolina. Didn't show a whole lot of promise. Was a surprise number 2 overall pick. And here's the thing. They take him at number 2. Okay? If he's your guy, that's fine. But who goes at number 10? Patrick Mahomes. Now, revisionist history. When he was playing at Texas Tech, not a lot of people thought he would be what he is now. I'll credit Louis Riddick, who I think is one of the smartest NFL people on the planet. He said Patrick Mahomes is the real deal. But 99 out of 100 scouts did not have Patrick Mahomes being but what he is now. However, there was another quarterback that was on the board that they could have taken. That was Deshaun Watson. Deshaun Watson was coming off 2 fantastic seasons at Clemson. His sophomore season, he loses to Alabama by 1 score in a crazy national title game. The next year, he runs it back with Clemson. They win the national championship. He's going to the NFL. At 11, the Houston Texans take Deshaun Watson, coming off a Heisman Trophy season, and the Bears don't take Deshaun. So I can say, okay, you don't take Mahomes because maybe your scouts are like, okay, yeah, he played well at Texas Tech, but he turned the ball over a lot. In the Big 12, the defense is pretty terrible. Maybe he isn't what he is. But Trubisky was playing at North Carolina. North Carolina has emerged as a good passing attack in the past couple of years with Mac Hollow. But Trubisky was a guy who had great feet, was not a great pocket passer, and did not have great numbers in college. North Carolina was a team that didn't even come close to making the playoffs, and they actually were never ranked in the top 25. And they played in a bad bowl game. He played well at the Senior Bowl, but that's besides the point. So the Bears have Mitch Trubisky, 2017. He plays the last 3 seasons. They have the option to pick up the option on his contract. They decide not to. He's a free agent. Now, I look at Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy. Ryan Pace, the general manager, he selected Trubisky. And he knows this year, if the Bears miss the playoffs, he's getting fired. Number one, it's the NFL. Other sports, you might get the benefit of the doubt. Not the NFL. Especially, I'm going to talk about the TV deal. This is it. The NFL, you win or you're fired. You could have a season where you go 10-6. You're fired. These guys, Matt Nagy never liked Mitch Trubisky. He decided to start Nick Foles over Mitch Trubisky last year. Nick Foles is not better than Mitch Trubisky. Yes, Nick Foles has more notoriety. Yes, he won a Super Bowl in Philadelphia, but he's never been successful outside of Philadelphia. He had great success under Chip Kelly. Great success under Doug Peterson. You saw him go to Jacksonville, unmitigated disaster. Last year in Chicago, unmitigated disaster. And they had to turn back to Trubisky after Foles was so terrible, which just tells you how much little faith they had in him. And, the Bears, through all these errors and quarterback dumps, and, they made it to a Super Bowl in 2006 with Rex Grossman at quarterback. Rex Grossman? I know, because they had Brian Urlacher and they had studs on defense. Again, but that wasn't enough to get them a Super Bowl. But they have not had a quarterback since Jim McMahon. That's my baseline, 1985. In 2008, they traded for who they thought was going to be an elite quarterback, and that was Jay Cutler. Played in Denver, played very well, but he was always a guy through college in the NFL. The knock on Jay Cutler was, this guy's not a motivated son of a bitch. He doesn't care. He doesn't have that drive. He doesn't breathe, and it's not football. Football isn't everything to him. He doesn't care enough. And we saw that. If you watch Jay Cutler in Chicago, you watch him in Miami, you watch him in life, this guy just doesn't care. And so through all this, the Bears have had so many bad quarterbacks, Mike Glennon and Jimmy Clausen, and through the years, just dump after dump after dump. And what do they do? Well, of course, Russell Wilson puts him on, a couple weeks ago, Russell Wilson was on the Dan Patrick Show saying how he wanted to be more included in Seattle personnel decisions and just how the team is running. And then an interview goes, we hear from the Seahawks. They're not very happy about Russ saying this. He called out his offensive line. And what happens? Well, his agent comes out the next day and says, well, Russ is not demanding a trade by any means, not demanding a trade. But, if Seattle was to trade him, we'd approve a trade to Vegas, Chicago, New Orleans, and Dallas. To me, that sounds like you're asking for a trade, but you're trying to be slick. That's indirectly asking for a trade. I mean, let's call a spade a spade. And so that's fine. If you want to, I don't begrudge any athlete that wants a trade. However, I prefer him just to say, I want a trade. I'm going to touch on Deshaun Watson in this podcast. He has asked for a trade. No problem with that. I think Russell trying to be a little cat and mouse, I think it's a little cowardly. And maybe he doesn't really want out of Seattle, but all the hoopla he's done and all the talking he's done sure sounds like it to me. But back to the Bears. So they want Russell Wilson, and to their credit, they put in a good offer for Russell Wilson. But if Seattle were to trade Russell Wilson, he would have $34 million in dead cap money to Seattle. Because of the contract, that's just how that works with guaranteed money. Be a $34 million cap hit, dead cap hit, that they can't spend that money. Doesn't make any sense to trade him, especially to the Bears. Trade him to the Bears. Who's coming back in return? Nick Foles? You're trading Russell Wilson. You got Pete Carroll, who's going to be 70 years old next month. You're not going through a rebuild at 7 years old. We see Bill Belichick spending money like crazy. You're not rebuilding at 70 years old. You want to win a Super Bowl and then probably retire. Again, I'm not saying you turn 70, you have to retire, but Father Time's undefeated, and eventually you probably want to go hang out with your wife and kids or grandkids before you're in the ground. And so Pete Carroll is not, if you trade Russell Wilson to the Bears, you got Nick Foles. He's the only quarterback under contract until yesterday. So who would be coming back? Nick Foles is Seattle's quarterback? No. The Vegas trade would make more sense to me. I've said that on this podcast for weeks. You get Derek Carr coming back in the deal for Russell Wilson. Derek Carr gets beat up. Derek Carr is, he gets put down as a guy who's not a very good quarterback. He's Matthew Stafford. Matthew Stafford gets a ton of publicity for being this great quarterback. He's Derek Carr. They both have never won a division title. Sound familiar? They both throw for a ton of yards, great fantasy quarterbacks, which means nothing to me. But if you play that shit, take them. Great. Have a good time. And both have poor defenses. Detroit's ranked in the bottom 4 last year, as did Derek Carr's in Vegas. And they've never won a playoff game. Matthew Stafford is he's in the top 20 all-time passing yards. He's never won a division title, never won a play. He's never done any of those things. But he gets talked about like this elite quarterback, but he's stuck in Detroit. Well, Derek Carr is stuck under John Gruden. He's stuck in Oakland, now Vegas. They're the same person. When it comes to career, when it comes to accomplishment, they don't have any. But Derek Carr in Seattle, you give Derek Carr a defense in Vegas, and actually if John Gruden believes in him, they can do some damage there. I like their team. I don't know what the hell they're doing with trading their offensive line. They traded Rodney Hudson, who's went to 3 of the last 4 Pro Bowls. Makes no sense. And then they traded away a Pro Bowl right guard in Gabe Jackson. He's gone to Seattle now. But that's in a whole other story. That makes no sense. I'm just saying in the Seattle part of the deal to Vegas, that would make the most sense. The Bears trade never made any. It was Dan Patrick said yesterday in the show that the Bears offered 3 first-round picks, a third-round pick, and 2 defensive starters for Russell Wilson. He didn't know who the players were, but Seattle said we're not trading him, which makes all the sense in the world to me. But so the Bears, they got Nick Foles under contract. Russell Wilson strikes out. I'm thinking maybe you try to make a push for Deshaun Watson. You can try to convince him to go there. He does have a no trade, but he's younger than Russell Wilson. He's only 25 years old. He's one of the top 5 quarterbacks in the NFL. Chicago's got a top 5 defense. You just franchise tagged Allen Robinson. What are you're gonna have to give up a lot to get Deshaun, but I think you'll still have a pretty good team. But you get to the Bears, what do? They sign Andy Dalton to a 1-year, $10 million deal. On paper, Andy Dalton's not terrible. Played in Cincinnati for a decade. Made the playoffs 5 times, never won a playoff game. So there's that. Spent last year in Dallas, was their backup quarterback until Dak Prescott got hurt, then became their starter. Never really worked out. And Andy Dalton's he's Jag. He's just a guy. He's just another quarterback. He's mediocrity, which is what the Bears are so accustomed to. Sometimes they're accustomed to, even below the mediocrity line, but Andy Dalton is going to be mediocre. But he's another Nick Foles. He's a guy who's not mobile. He's a guy that's got a decent arm, but the Bears are not going to. You got Green Bay. Green Bay in that division is still an elite. Aaron Rodgers at quarterback. You got they went to 2 straight NFC Championship games. They're the clear favorite. I like Kirk D. Cousins III more than I like Andy Dalton. Detroit's going through a rebuild, but Jared Goff. Jared Goff's better than Andy Dalton. If I'm looking at the quarterbacks, the Bears, you're in last. Again. Does that mean you're going to be last in the division? No, because Detroit's got a really terrible roster. How does Jared Goff adapt? All this. But if you're a Bears fan, it's got to be a kick in the pills year after year where you cannot address the most important position in sports. Quarterback's more important than goaltending. You can cover it up easier. Your quarterback touches the ball on every play. Your goalie does not touch the puck on every play. Every snap goes to your quarterback. He may hand it to the running back. He gets that play off, so to speak, but it's in his hands every play. And maybe the Bears move up in the draft, but right now they got the 20th pick. You're going to have to give up a lot to move up to take a quarterback. I heard an interview yesterday. They're scouting Trey Lance from North Dakota State. Okay. But you're bringing in a rookie Rookie quarterbacks are not always, the success rate's not always there. I mentioned Justin Herbert. He was fantastic last year for the Chargers. They went 5-11. Joe Burrow was fantastic till he blew his knee out, but he only had won one game in his 10 starts. Again, Baker Mayfield went 7-9 his first year. Not bad, actually. Josh Allen went 6-10. Lamar sat for most of the year and then got into the playoffs, only starting the last 4 games. So it's difficult to have success early in drafting a rookie quarterback. Having Andy Dalton as a placeholder is not what Bears fans want. If I'm the Bears, I still try to pull off a Deshaun Watson trade. Again, he has a full no trade. I would not want to go to the Bears. I wouldn't. But for Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy, I think they both know this is it. If you don't come up with something this year for this to work, you're fired. Somebody else is going to be doing your job. And for them, the answer is Andy Dalton. That's a tough look. I would have taken Ryan Fitzpatrick over Andy Dalton myself. Dalton's made the playoffs. Fitzpatrick hasn't. But Fitzpatrick was better than Andy Dalton last year in a tougher division. Andy Dalton was playing in the NFC East with Washington and the Giants and the Eagles were playing for the Cowboys, where every team stunk and he missed the playoffs. Remember that. He could have made the playoffs in the last game of the year playing against the Giants, couldn't win that game. You're going to the NFC North where you got, the Packers and the Vikings, I think, will be competitive. Detroit, who knows? They're a moribund franchise, but maybe Jared Goff finds some early success. It's just, for the Bears and their quarterback situation, it's just a failure. And, Mitch Trubisky, he was failed in Chicago. I don't think he's a great quarterback. I don't think he was before he was drafted. But I think it's tough on him because his coach never believed in him. But showing what the free agency did to him, not a lot of people believe in Mitch Trubisky because he had to sign in Buffalo yesterday a 1-year deal to be a backup quarterback. Ryan Fitzpatrick is going to be the starter in Washington. Andy Dalton is going to be the starter. Tyrod Taylor got signed by the Houston Texans. He may be the starter because Deshaun Watson, who the hell knows? I'm going to get into that in a minute. But a bunch of these guys got potentially starting jobs, and Mitch Trubisky, a former number 2 overall pick, had to take a backup job. He's now the backup quarterback to Josh Allen. He's never going to see the field unless Josh Allen blows his knee out. He couldn't get a look at a starter's job at a competition going into camp. So I think Matt Nagy really hindered him and hurt him because even if you're, Ryan Leaf went number 2 overall in the Peyton Manning draft, and he was a bust. But when he got released the first time around, he got a starting job right away. He didn't have to compete for the job, even when he was terrible his first locale. Trubisky's leaving Chicago. It's his first time. He had to go to Buffalo. That's a difficult situation for him, where Andy Dalton, the Ryan Fitzpatrick's journeymen are getting starting jobs over him. But maybe this would be the bet for the best for Trubisky. He's going to go play behind Josh Allen. Again, he's not going to play unless there's an injury, but he will get to watch a great quarterback. He gets to work with Brandon Beane. He gets to work with Sean McDermott, really competent people. And I think I can say pretty confidently, he's been dealing with a lot of incompetence in Chicago. So it's probably a really breath of fresh air for him to say, well, yep, it didn't work out, but I get to go somewhere where at least I can deal with people that are level-headed and know what they're doing. But crazy. I'm going to get to some of the bigger signings, but an interesting signing for me yesterday was Tyrod Taylor. Tyrod Taylor, beside Tyrod Taylor should just say placeholder, because he's done it 3 times. So it started off in Buffalo. He started his career in Baltimore. He was always behind Joe Flacco, backup quarterback, what have you. Finally leaves there and gets a contract from Buffalo. Goes to Buffalo, makes the playoffs, but they draft Josh Allen. Josh Allen's the heir apparent. They move on. Then he goes to Cleveland. He looks like he's going to be a starting quarterback there. What do? They draft Baker Mayfield, number 1 overall. Starts the first 4 games of the season. He gets replaced. Baker Mayfield, the permanent starter, placeholder. Then what does he do last year? He goes to the Chargers, and it kind of looks like it's going to be his job. He starts week 1 against the Chargers for the Chargers. Week 2, he injured his ribs. A doctor messed up and actually injured his ribs. He had to miss almost 6 games because of a bad infection. And Justin Herbert got the ball, came in, never gave it up. So Tyrod Taylor is the epitome of a placeholder quarterback. Not a bad quarterback. 50 touchdowns, 16 interceptions in his career. Efficient, doesn't really throw the ball down the field, but he's not going to lose the game for you. So he's a competent backup, low starter type efficiency at quarterback. But he goes to Houston, he can make up to $12 million. And this is interesting for a couple reasons. Well, high-level backups make close to that money, 8 to 12 million. So he could be the backup quarterback. But Houston still has Deshaun Watson under contract. He's demanded a trade that's been on the table since January, but nothing's happened. And as far as I know, when it comes to reporting and just keeping you guys up to date, people are calling, they're not answering the phone still. Now, there's still time. The draft is April 30th. I assume if they're going to trade Deshaun Watson, it's going to be before the draft so they can get those draft picks, get capital, and move on. This trade for Deshaun Watson, I see it similar to Russell Wilson, where if you're trading Deshaun Watson, you want a quarterback in return. So a team like the Jets makes a lot of sense. You got Sam Darnold. They got the number 2 pick in the draft. You can make some stuff happen there. So you get the number 2 pick. You get Sam Darnold if you want. You could flip Darnold, take Zach Wilson with the number 2 pick. That's an option. You got the Dolphins, who they got Tua Tagovailoa. The Dolphins actually have the 3rd overall pick, which used to belong to Houston, which they traded. So they could get that pick back, get Tua as their new starter, or get Tua, flip him, and draft a quarterback at 3. You got a lot of different options. Those are just 2 teams. Another team for Deshaun Watson, where if he goes there, I think this team can and will win the Super Bowl, and that's the San Francisco 49ers. Yesterday, San Francisco gave Trent Williams the biggest contract for an offensive lineman in NFL history. 6-year, $138.6 million with $50 million guaranteed and a $30 million signing bonus. He's worth it. He's one of the best left tackles I think he's the best in the league. He just eats up pass rushers. And what do you want as a quarterback? You want to be protected. And that's why you signed Trent Williams. And maybe San Francisco thinks, well, Jimmy Garoppolo, injury prone, but we're going to give him a good offensive line, get him some good weapons. He can come back, get us back to the Super Bowl like he did 2 years ago. But with Kyle Shanahan at offensive coordinator, head coach, with Deshaun Watson and the way they run that offense, it'd be over if they could make that work. And he said he wants to go there, possibly Denver's another rumored team. But say Houston sticks to their guns, say, okay, we're not trading you. And maybe he'll fold and he'll show up to camp after saying he would hold out. I'm not sure. I think this guy's pretty set in his ways, and he may sit out the whole year. He'll get a ton of fines, lose a lot of money. But say they sit him the whole year, and he sits there. Tyrod Taylor is going to come in and be a competent quarterback, but the roster's terrible. Tyrod could play out of his mind. This team's not going to do well. Deshaun Watson is a superstar. He went 4-12 last year. So to expect Tyrod Taylor to do any better is laughable. So you got Tyrod Taylor, say he goes 2-14. You got Deshaun Watson sitting there. Then 2-14, you're at least getting a top 3 pick. You could pick the quarterback of your future. And then you still have Deshaun Watson to flip. So the more I think about it, Tyrod Taylor will start the whole year. He's wanted an opportunity to start. He'll get that. Houston, maybe Deshaun Watson comes back and they get their wish. He can work with David Culley. They can figure out what went wrong. If he doesn't, you find the hell out of him. You trade him next offseason after you have your quarterback of the future. More and more I think about it, it wouldn't surprise me to see Deshaun Watson sit the entire season. For him, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Of course, he's losing revenue. But for Houston, why would you trade him right now? Maybe you don't love Sam Darnold. Maybe you don't love Tua. And you say, let's watch next season. Let's pick the quarterback we want because we're going to be terrible. You get to pick the quarterback of your future that you're in love with. And, Sean Payton said this week. The biggest mistake teams make is say you got a top 5 pick in the draft. You say, okay, we got to take a quarterback. No, you got to take your quarterback. You got to take the quarterback you believe in. Teams that lose consistently just take a quarterback because he's there. We see an influx of quarterback play. I think of the Jets. I think of the Dolphins. I think of the Bears. You just pick a quarterback because you feel that you have to because it's peer pressure. If it's a guy that you don't think is going to be successful, but you're like, well, he's on the board, we have to take him. That's not the way to go. I feel the Chargers really wanted to take Justin Herbert because they believed in him. Looks like it's going to pay off. Miami, I'm not sure they love Tua. Again, Tua the year before at Alabama had all the hype in the world because he was playing unbelievable. He had replaced Jalen Hurts. He had all that momentum, won the national championship. That next year, he was injury prone, didn't play as consistently well, and it was over a year that Miami was tanking for Tua. So when Miami actually played well and they dropped to the 5th pick and Tua's there, you're not telling me they didn't have pressure to draft Tua Tagovailoa? You're damn right they did. And I'm not sure I think it's more of a PR thing where they said, if we don't draft Tua, we're going to get carved. And they decided not to. They decided to face peer pressure. That's the worst way you can handle business in sports, in life. I'm going to do this or not do this because people are going to be angry or upset. To me, that's the wrong way to do business, the wrong way to live your life. And for the Dolphins, it's one of the same. Your life is going to be really good or really bad based on having a good quarterback. And Tua, in his first season, a lot of mixed reviews. I don't think he was a great. I think 1 to 10 scale, I give him a 4.5. You had to get Ryan Fitzpatrick to go close games. You didn't trust Tua, your franchise quarterback, the guy who's going to turn it around. Miami's similar to Chicago where they haven't had a quarterback that you can be proud of since Dan Marino. Maybe they had one in Tannehill, but you had Adam Gase who just sucks the life out of everything. Tannehill has gone to Tennessee. He's made a Pro Bowl. So it's interesting, this quarterback movement. We still kind of, Alex Smith is still on the market. I'm interested to see where he goes. I recommended him going to the Chargers in a backup role, be that veteran to Justin Herbert. I've also heard rumors about him going to Jacksonville, where he could be the backup to Trevor Lawrence when they pick him number 1 overall. So those are a couple landing spots for Alex Smith. He's still a quarterback that's available. So we'll see what happens. But another team that's done a lot is the Arizona Cardinals. They've added a lot of veterans. They obviously started with J.J. Watt. I think the signing was a little rich when it comes to money. I don't think he is what he used to be, but he's still got a big name. Maybe it helps their PR, and he's a good guy, so they take him. Then they signed AJ Green. Now, AJ Green used to be a top 5 receiver. In the past decade, he's got the 2nd most receiving yards in the NFL. But he fell on hard times. He tore his ACL. He's battled injuries playing in Cincinnati all those years. But, they got DeAndre Hopkins. So AJ Green's going to be number 2 receiver every game. So that's a plus. They got Andy Isabella. They got some good players. They still have Kyler Murray. They acquired Rodney Hudson from Vegas to be their starting center. They're starting to rework their offensive line. That's promising. So they got some good pieces. But you got AJ Green, you got Andy Isabella, Christian Kirk. Maybe AJ Green, a lot of games, will be the number 3 receiver. He's only given $7 million. He wants to turn his career around. It's easier to do that when you got DeAndre Hopkins because DeAndre Hopkins is going to get doubled a lot. AJ Green's going to get man-to-man coverage. He can take advantage of that. He's not a burner anymore, but he doesn't need to be because DeAndre Hopkins is going to get the focus. So Kyler Murray gets him. Kirk, Isabella. The big intrigue for me is, will Larry Fitzgerald come back? It's believed that he's played his last down, but I've been hearing that for 5 years, and every year he just says, no, I'm going to come back, one more year. And they got a better team now than they've had since the Super Bowl run they made in 08. So if you're Larry, you're probably like, well, I want to win one, and I love Arizona, so maybe this is it for me. Maybe this is the team that can do it. But they've been active going after kind of veterans, but I don't hate their moves. I think the big thing for them is Kyler Murray going to be the future. I saw some really good things, and in the back half of last year, he faded. We'll need to see a consistent 16 games from Kyler Murray this year for them to be a playoff, being playoff contention. Because in that division, you got Russell Wilson, you got San Francisco, which I said is even with Garoppolo, I think they're a very good team. And then you got the Rams with Stafford, one of the best defenses in the NFL. So there's no room for error in this division. You're going to have to win these games. You're going to have to win some division games that maybe on paper you should lose. But I credit Arizona for taking a swing. I think they know they're in a good position. They still have Kyler. The thing is, in the NFL, you go for it and spend money when your quarterback is on a rookie contract, because you got 3-4 years for that window. When the quarterback's off the rookie contract, he's going to get paid over $150 million guaranteed, and then you're screwed. Then it's really tough to win. And because you see all these quarterbacks that make big money, like Mahomes, Brady, they rework their contracts so their salary cap number goes by, so you can sign more players. Mahomes restructured his contract, and what did the Chiefs get from it? 2 new offensive linemen. Joe Tooney signed him to a big deal, $80 million. Then they get Kyle Long to come out of retirement, the son of Howie, brother of Chris, former Chicago Bear, to come play for the Chiefs on a 1-year deal. And what was the biggest problem for the Chiefs the last couple seasons? Offensive line. So you got Mahomes, you still got the weapons. You want to protect them, you want to win another Super Bowl, get some offensive linemen. And the Chiefs have done that so far in free agency. So credit to Arizona. Obviously, I touched on it the other day, but the Pats have been so active. They brought back a couple of familiar faces in Kyle Van Noy. They did get some bad news yesterday where Patrick Chung, their safety, retired. They'll need to replace that. Wouldn't be surprised to see them draft a safety, at least high in the first couple rounds, because that's a Bill Belichick MO. But they've been active with the tight ends, with Matthew Judon, with Aguilar, Kendrick Bourne. So, and I think they'll still be interesting in the draft to see if they draft a quarterback or if Cam is, really their only option heading into the season with Jarrett Stidham like he was last year as the backup. But yeah, the NFL is always, there's still players. Kenny Golladay is still available. Juju Smith-Schuster, 2 premier wide receivers. It's rumored that Juju is meeting with the Jets today. Kenny Golladay met with the Bears, and he also met with the Giants last night, so likely he'll go to either of those teams. The Bucs have been active, keeping Gronk, keeping Shaq Barrett. They re-signed their place kicker, Ryan Suckup, to a 3-year deal. So a lot happening in the NFL. I mean, free agency is still not done. Teams are still going to try to make moves. We got the draft in a little over a month. So this league never goes to bed. And I mentioned last night it was announced that they have a new TV deal, and it's $110 billion over 11 years. That's Fox, ESPN/ABC, CBS. You got Amazon, who's going to take over doing Thursday Night Football. It's a massive, massive deal. It just proves how the NFL is king. They just are. People love baseball. People love hockey, basketball, what have you. It's not like the NFL. It's just not. The amount they print money, and they do it so effectively, and how they run their business, it's really smart. I think it's kind of cool how the NFL just dominates the sporting world like no other. But $110 billion TV deal. But it's big news because it's going to affect the salary cap in the years to come. Again, Thursday Night Football is going to be on Amazon now. I think it's going to be with Fox for a couple more seasons, but then it'll be streamed on Amazon every Thursday night. So that's going to be a new change. It won't be on cable TV, which is kind of a wave of the future. But interesting for sure that I'm sure the Players Association, the NFL, the teams are excited because this is going to bring new revenue. And once COVID gets going, it sure looks like the fall in the States, these stadiums are going to be packed and you're going to see revenue start pouring through again. So just interesting stuff here from the NFL and obviously with free agency this week. Pivoting to the NHL, for the wrong reasons, there's been a headline this week, and it's been with the Buffalo Sabres. Buffalo Sabres, prior to last night, had lost 12 in a row under Ralph Kruger's head coach. And they've been outscored in that 12 game span. Their plus minus was minus 34 in goal differential. Just pathetic. And Jack Eichel's been hurt for some of it, yeah. Linus Ullmark, the starting goalie's been hurt for some of it, yes. But even you look at their team, you got Jeff Skinner, Sam Reinhart, Rasmus Ristolainen, Rasmus Dahlin, the number 1 overall pick. You shouldn't be this bad. But they've lost 12 in a row, and after Tuesday, they fired Ralph Kruger. Had to happen. You knew it was going to happen. I thought he might get to the end of the year just because you knew they were pathetic before the season, but they're just a new level. They lost again last night. 13 straight losses. But I look at the Buffalo Sabres, and I said it last week, they're going to have to go through a rebuild again. And I don't know how you tell fans we're rebuilding again when you had no success and didn't make the playoffs through your first 2 rebuilds. But they selected Rasmus Dahlin number 1 overall. The guy is a no-show. He was a slam dunk number 1 overall pick, and how his career has turned. He's not even a factor anymore. He's not. If he stays in Buffalo, I don't think he's going to be an elite defenseman because he just isn't right now. Ristolainen's been there forever. He's just a solid guy, but he's nothing special. Jeff Skinner's got a terrible contract. Again, Linus Ullmark, people really love him in net. I haven't seen it yet. Again, he's been injured, but you're playing on this team. Maybe it makes you look worse than you are. But again, the proof's in the pudding. When you're in the game, you're not winning, just like Carter Hutton's not winning. So that's a wash. But it's just ugly right now in Buffalo. You fire Ralph Kruger, you got Kevin Adams, who's gonna have to figure out what to do with the deadline. Do you move Ristolainen finally? He's been on the market for seems like 5 years. Taylor Hall's on a rental contract. What are you going to get for him? I don't think you're going to get a big haul for Taylor Hall right now. Sam Reinhart, I think, is a guy you keep, but players are not going to want to sign in Buffalo, and the good players they have are going to want to go. Like this summer, if Jack Eichel was not traded, I'd be shocked because he's been there for a while, and I'm not saying he should not be criticized because you should be. You're part of the problem. But the fact that this team is this bad, where you've lost 13 straight, there's 2 big streaks right now in pro sports. You got Buffalo's lost 13 in a row in the NHL. The Houston Rockets have lost 18 in a row in the NBA. It's just ugly right now. And, I think Buffalo, first thing they need to do is hire an assistant GM with experience. Kevin Adams is a rookie general manager. He hasn't been through these negotiations. He's never been through a trade deadline. He's got to learn the ropes a little bit. How are you going to deal with Skinner, Ristolainen, Eichel, the Eichel trade? What can you get back? What's the appropriate, assets that you get back? I think he needs somebody with some experience, similar to what they did in Pittsburgh with Berkey. You got Hextall, but Berkey's the president, and he kind of helps guide the general manager. He's not doing it daily, but he's there. Brendan Shanahan, I'm sure in Toronto, has a big say in what Kyle Dubas does when it comes to trades. It's not talked about, but I guarantee you he's in those meetings and he's saying, no, I don't really want this player. Okay, scratch that off. But for Buffalo, you're in a tough division, yeah, of course, but it just looks like this is going to be a struggle for a long time, where another rebuild is coming for the Buffalo Sabres, and that fan base just has to be. I mean, they're getting into Chicago Bear territory when it comes to just incompetence. The Pagulas have owned the team. This will be their 10th year owning the team. They're not going to make the playoffs for the 10th time. They've never made the playoffs as owners. And for Buffalo, I think Kevin Adams has such a tough job ahead of him. But maybe this trade deadline is not going to be the time to move guys, because I think it's going to be tough to pull off trades. But this summer, when you got more teams involved that want your assets, you got to look at it and try to acquire draft capital and just try to build a sustainable team but you drafted Jack Eichel second overall. Sam Reinhart went third overall. Dahlin went first. You got some talent, and it's still not coming together is really the frustrating part. Again, they traded Ryan O'Reilly because the hockey was not fun for him anymore there. They got nothing in that deal. Tage Thompson has never turned out. He's an AHL player. He was the big name in that deal. Hudson Fasching did not turn out. So bad trades too, but Kevin Adams is going to need a lot of luck here to turn this around, because it's a flat out disaster in Buffalo, and it's getting uglier and uglier by the minute. Another ugly situation. Wednesday night, the Philadelphia Flyers, they've been in a tailspin. If you hear me on this podcast, if you watch Under Review, I've been hard on the Philadelphia goaltending, and it's warranted, because Carter Hart has been a no-show all season long. Brian Elliott's gotten starts in place of Carter Hart because Alain Vigneault does not trust him. Wednesday night, they start Brian Elliott. Both guys will get in the net. Philly lost 9-0 to their biggest rival, the New York Rangers. 9-0. Mika Zibanejad, good hockey player. He had a 5-goal game last year, but again, he's not Wayne Gretzky. He had 6 points in a period. Hat trick and 3 assists in one period against the hapless Flyers. And they come back and win last night, but it's just the fact that you lose 9-0 to your biggest rival, the Rangers, tells me something about that team. They're not mentally strong. They're not, again, Giroux and Voracek, all these guys that have been there forever. They're getting long in the tooth. This may come down on Vigneault, but if you're the general manager there, you got to look at Giroux, Voracek, and say, they're not winning. They're outside the playoffs looking in right now, chasing Boston and Pittsburgh. But I like Boston more than I like Philly. Pittsburgh's playing some good hockey. They lost last night to New Jersey. But for Philly, if you miss the playoffs after finishing first in the division last year, and this is only Vigneault's second year on the job, so I don't know if they'll fire him just after 2 years, but it would be a colossal disaster for this team to miss the playoffs. Again, it's the toughest division in hockey for me. Not even close, because you got the Islanders. Washington's really good. Boston's been an okay team this year, and Philly and Pittsburgh are kind of similar. But you got to look at long-term plans in Philly. And again, it's only one game. I get it, but 9-0 is worse than 7-2. 9-0 on the road. It's 6 goals in the second period, where you had Brian Elliott and Carter Hart, who couldn't stop a beach ball. They win last night. Good win against the Islanders. Kudos to them. But I'm not going to give you that much credit for beating the Islanders after a night where you stink it up and lose 9-0. You should come out with some heart. No pun intended. Where you actually come out and compete. But for Philly, it's goaltending, again, defensive play. They miss Matt Niskanen. He's a guy who's just a stable guy, but they miss him. They have to play Justin Braun more. Provorov's played a ton. I think Travis Sanheim and Philip Myers, quite frankly, have taken a step back in their games, respectively. Sanheim doesn't really bring it offensively. I think two of them have similar issues. Sanheim doesn't bring a lot offensively when it comes to creativity. Myers doesn't bring a lot to the game when it comes to defending in his own zone and breakouts. I think he struggles to do offensively. Really gifted, And I'm not here to pile on him. Again, he's from New Brunswick, so you obviously root for him. But I call a spade. And I think in Philly, they got to look at a big picture and say, Carter Hart's our guy. We need to do everything we can to nurture this kid and make him happy and get him to be our number one goalie. Because if you don't have goaltending, like you don't have a quarterback, you're fucked. You're done. You could have an elite roster. You're done before the season starts if you don't have a goalie. I think Colorado Avalanche, they could have won the cup last year. But going into the playoffs, they had Philip Grubauer and all these other goalies that you didn't trust. They had Michael Hutchinson playing in the playoffs. You're done. You're done when the game starts, because if you're a team and you start the game and you're nervous about your goalie, just speaking from experience, it's really hard to win because you always got one eye looking behind you and say, F, a turnover, that puck's in the net. That's just half the battle. And I think in Philly, they've had to do a lot of that because they're like, well, Carter Hart can't stop anything right now. Brian Elliott's playing too much because he's a veteran guy. He's supposed to be a backup, but he's playing starters minutes. But we'll see what the fortitude and what Philly has. Again, they get a win last night after being embarrassed. They got the Islanders again on Saturday. And the rest of the year, they're not going to get many easy opponents. And you have Boston, you have Pittsburgh, you have Washington. You're going to have to bring it, because otherwise you're going to be outside the playoffs looking in, and maybe they make a coaching change after just 2 years from Alain Vigneault. And maybe, Captain Claude Giroux, Voracek, the elder statesmen of these teams are playing elsewhere in 2022. The North Division, it's been an interesting one for sure. This week the Maple Leafs have been idle. We did hear Kyle Dubas speak, which I'll touch on in a minute. But, Monday, Winnipeg lost to Montreal. They beat them Wednesday. Winnipeg loses to Edmonton last night. Edmonton this week picked up 4 out of 6 points against Calgary and Winnipeg, respectively. And we saw Vancouver beat Ottawa twice. Now they're 2 points back of Montreal. Montreal having about 4 games in hand. However, they play each other. Montreal plays Vancouver tonight and tomorrow. You got Toronto, who will get back on the ice tonight. They'll play Calgary tonight, tomorrow as well. And you got Winnipeg and Edmonton playing again tomorrow night. Edmonton is now tied Toronto in the points total in the division at 40. Toronto does have 3 games in hand. You have Winnipeg 2 points behind Toronto, and they're even in their games played. But this week, Kyle Dubas came out and he said, he kind of addressed the media talking about their trade deadline plans. And I like it. He said, I want to address my forward position on the left side. I think that's paramount. Again, they put Jimmy Vesey on waivers. They lose him to Vancouver. I don't think they expected to lose him this week. But who steps in? Alex Galchenyuk. I'm going to start with this. I have no problem with Alex Galchenyuk playing. None. This is, I think, his 9th team in the NHL. This is his last spot. However, everybody knows how much I love media, especially big media markets where, the most important team is located. And for Toronto, Alex Galchenyuk, I don't know, I think he's Tavares as an underager in Ontario, the way this guy's been getting talked about this week. Galchenyuk's on the second line with Tavares, and he looks good in practice. Yeah, he's been lighting it up in the AHL. Okay. Alex Galchenyuk's playing for Ottawa this year, the worst team in the division, and he got waived. He's not an elite player, okay? It's just not happening. But I get it. He's an offensive guy. You want to give him an opportunity in that second line. But Galchenyuk's not the answer on the left side. Consistently, he has not done it in his career. And what's so frustrating to me with what I assume Sheldon Keefe puts out the lineup card, but maybe they do it together because him and Dubas are such good buddies. So Joe Thornton continues to be on the first line. He can't play there with Matthews and Marner. Wayne Simmons coming back. That'll help. I wouldn't put Simmons on the... Hyman should play with Matthews and Marner because he makes their life a lot easier. And I get it. It's tough to put your 3 most important forwards on one line. And yes, I said that. Hyman is the 3rd most important forward on Toronto. It's not close. It's not Tavares. It's not Nylander. not Galchenyuk, even though maybe some fans think it is. It's Zach Hyman, because he does things that just other teams, that players don't do. And I'm talking about Marner, Matthews to a lot of extent, because I think with his injury, you don't see him as active in his own zone, stealing pucks in his own defensive zone. Hyman chases the puck. He gets pucks to his opponents, and he's actually been scoring and has got some good skill, which goes under the radar too. But he needs to play with them. Joe Thornton, to me, he's the fourth line player. That might be tough for him to swallow, but you signed here. It's not a charity. Again, the sentimentality I think teams have is a weakness. And maybe having a heart in this situation is a weakness of Dubas and Keith and Co. You need to be a villain. You need to say, Joe, we love you. And you're going to play on this team, but you're playing on the fourth line. And you know what? By the end of the year, he might be a healthy scratch. And I'm not exaggerating. You can't play him and Spezza together on the fourth line. Like, is it like the seniors tour on the fourth? It's going to be too slow. I'm not trying to be mean here. I'm a realist, and I know hockey. It's not going to work. And for Toronto, adding a left winger is paramount. And I think, Nick Foligno's a right winger. But in Columbus, I don't know if he's going to be available. They're 2 points behind Chicago now. They've made up ground. Is David Savard going to be available? That's another interesting name. Boone Jenner is the name is being tossed around. He's got another year on his deal at 3.5. I think Toronto would be really interested in him. Columbus, if they can catch Chicago, which they're on track, maybe these players aren't moved because they say, well, we'll get to the playoffs. We'll take our chances. That's one angle. There's other guys, maybe like a Miles, but I think Toronto needs a top 6 left winger. And they're not going to be easy. Again, Philip Forsberg in Nashville speaks to me. It's going to take a lot to get him, because I think he's an elite player. But you put him with Tavares and Nylander. You put Hyman with Matthews and Marner. Then you got your Engvall. Put Engvall, Mikheyev, Simmons on the third line. And then maybe add another player, Galchenyuk, because he's ripping up the league. You can put him on that fourth line. He played in the fourth line last year in Minnesota in the playoffs. It's not like he hasn't done it. So I think Philip Forsberg, it would take a lot to acquire him. He's an elite player. I look at it, it'd have to be money in, money out. So you'd have to, likely Kerfoot is gone, which is fine by me. They have playing him at center this week in practice. No. Kerfoot can go, and you're probably going to have to move some prospects. It's late in the season, so his cap hit won't be as much. So it won't be as much money coming in and coming out. I'm not a mathematician here, but I think you could, with Kerfoot, maybe add another contract in there. You'll make it work. And him being there would be pivotal. I think you also look. He said he's comfortable with his defense core. That's a red flag to me. Travis Dermott, I don't care if he plays 8 minutes a night. I don't want him 8 minutes a night. Because playing him 8 minutes a night tells me you're playing Morgan Rielly 24.5. And guess I don't want that either, because I've seen that happen, and it's a train wreck. Morgan Rielly's a good defenseman. He's not a great defenseman. There's a big difference in the NHL, and teams that can understanding, again, I correlate defensemen to quarterbacks in this situation. You need to understand what a defenseman is. Teams that draft a defenseman, it's like drafting a quarterback and saying, this guy's going to be this. Well, what if he isn't? There's defensemen all around the league. Seth Jones has struggled to start this season. He's starting to play well. Starting to play really well. OT winner last night, 2 goals, stud. Seth Jones can play 30 minutes a game. Thomas Chabot can play 30 minutes a game. Morgan Rielly can't in Toronto. And I think if you have 3, your third D pair is never going to be as good as your first. I'm not saying that. But Dermott is a flat-out liability. Get a better defenseman. If David Savard is available, and Columbus is 2 points behind them. It's 2 points behind Chicago with same games played. So they're kind of back in the playoff hunt. If he's available, Toronto should move heaven and earth to get him so that the Winnipeg Jets don't. Number one, so they improve. Number two, so Winnipeg does not get him. Because that's who Toronto should fear the most. Edmonton's tied with them in points right now, but they get 3 games. They're better than Edmonton. They've dominated Edmonton all year. They're going to be, if they play Edmonton in the playoffs, I really hope that's not a series because put me to sleep. But they'll beat them. I'm confident in saying they're going to beat the Edmonton Oilers. However, you let Winnipeg get David Savard, say they get Savard and Ekholm. I like Winnipeg's top 9 forwards right now better than I like Toronto's. And again, the Leafs D is not so great that it's just going to be, well, we got Travis Dermott and Zach Bogosian, and you got Nathan Beaulieu and Sami Niku. Oh, great. Yeah. I'll take Sami Niku over Travis Dermott. I think Savard would be a great add. You can play him in your top 4. You can put Hall in the third pair because I think he's kind of shown himself. He's kind of wearing out a little bit. I'd like him better on a third pair myself. And I think he'd be better there because he's not asked to do as much. If Savard is not available, again, Matthias Ekholm is a name that's thrown out. And, looking at different teams, maybe you go to Anaheim. Anaheim's one of the worst teams in the NHL. You go to them and say, okay, Josh Manson, what's it going to take to get him? Josh Manson's not a well-known player. I think he'd be perfect in Toronto because he's hard-nosed. He's not going to put up a lot of points. Statistically, this guy's not a statistical darling, but he's mean. He gets pucks out of the zone. He's just a simple player. He's like Bogosian, but he's better than Zach Bogosian, but he's similar to Bogosian. And he'd be an upgrade over Dermott. That's for damn sure. So that's another name to maybe keep an eye on. In Josh Manson in Anaheim. They're going to be bottom 5 in the league. Maybe you go to Anaheim and say, okay, well, we're trading Josh Manson. We'll give you Nick Robertson. Again, if Toronto's going to make a move, their prospects are going to go. Sandin, their first, maybe Nick Robertson, Rodion Amirov, their first round pick last year. These guys are all untouchable. For a team like Toronto, for a team like Winnipeg, go all in and trade your prospects because you're not going to have a better chance to win than this year. You're playing against all Canadian teams till the conference final. Then who the hell knows what happens? You tell me you play Vegas. Say you get Vegas because you're 4th in win percentage. They're first. They got to go through Colorado and St. Louis potentially. That's tougher than Toronto going through Edmonton the first round where there won't be a check thrown. And then you got to go through Winnipeg, which should be tougher, say. Or Winnipeg goes through Montreal, then they go through Toronto. It's an easier route. And go this year because you're back to your old divisional alignment. It's not going to be as easy. So for me, trade the prospects that you have. Toronto's prospect pipeline sucks. So it's not like you're losing. I get their skepticism saying we're going to have nothing, but you want to win a cup. You haven't won one in over 50 years. You at least win a couple rounds. And if you're going to win a couple rounds, it's going to be this year. So they get back on the ice tonight against Calgary. Calgary's fighting for a playoff spot. They're 3 points out right now. They're 3-1 under Daryl Sutter, coming off a loss, 7-3 Wednesday night to Edmonton. So be looking to bounce back. They got a back-to-back. Like I said, Vancouver has a back-to-back against Montreal tonight and tomorrow. So a couple interesting games there. I just thought it's important to shout out teams that just find ways to win. And to me, that's the Minnesota Wild. The Minnesota Wild, they're third. They lost to Colorado last night, but they've been playing really well. They're third in the Western Division, only a point behind Colorado, 3 points behind Vegas. And so little expectations coming into the year. You get Bill Guerin, who's kind of took over a bad spot where he's got Suter on a long-term contract. He's got Parise on a long-term contract. He had Spurgeon on a long-term contract. Got to move Eric Stahl. He had an old team and that he inherited, but he started a youth movement of sorts. We see Kirill Kaprizov. This guy can play. This guy's 23 and he's a rookie, so he's gonna win Rookie of the Year, even though I'm not huge on that. I think he should be under 20 to win the award. But he's gonna win the award. But the kid's so fun to watch. he's got it all. I mean, his passing ability, the behind the back pass he threw the other night to Victor Rask was just unbelievable. Dean Evison has got to be right up there when it comes to coach of the year. Taking over last year for Bruce Boudreau. Since then, this team's really bought in. And for me, he's in my top 3 of my ballots when it comes to coach of the year. You got to look at him. Sheldon Keefe would be in my top 5. I don't think he'd be in my top 3 right now. I think he's done a good job this year in Toronto. He'd be right there. I think you got to look at Joel Quenneville in Florida, who had really low expectations. Jeremy Colleton in Chicago. So there's a couple different guys to look at, but Dean Evison would be high up on my list for sure. But again, Victor Rask, Matt Zuccarello, they got guys that just step up, and I credit the team for battling this far. They lose to Colorado last night, but that's going to happen. Colorado's had a tough start to the year. They've had COVID issues. Nathan McKinnon's dealt with 2 different injuries, but they're starting to find their game. Mikko Rantanen's starting to get going offensively. McKinnon, Landeskog are all healthy at the same time. Phil Grubauer's played been great in net. So we'll see what brings for Colorado. But for Minnesota, for this far into the year to be 3rd in this division ahead of St. Louis, you deserve a lot of credit for how you played and the way you've done it. So kudos to them. I mentioned early in the Central Division, you got Columbus, who's now 2 points behind Chicago for 4th, but the gap, Tampa's in 1st with 44 points. Carolina and Florida are tied at 42. It's a 9-point buffer between them and Chicago. They've really separated themselves. These top 3 teams in the Central are all really good. I mean, yet Carolina lose last night, Florida lost last night, Tampa pulled out a win over Chicago with Victor Hedman getting an empty netter. But these teams are all really strong. I think Tampa starting to find their game. Vasilevsky's playing at an unbelievable level. I think he's going to win the Vezina, possibly challenge for the Hart Trophy. But you got them playing so well. Bobrovsky's starting to find the net, playing well. You still got Huberdeau, Hornquist, and just a plateau of players to step up in Florida. And Carolina's just been probably one of the more consistent teams all year, just game in, game out. They don't get blown out. They play hard. They've lost 2 in a row, but we'll see what they can do to bounce back Saturday against Columbus. But this is a dogfight division. In the East, you got Washington at 42 points, Islanders at 42 points. So they're battling for first, and you got Boston, Pittsburgh behind them. And then in the North, you got Toronto, Edmonton tied, but Toronto 3 games in hand. Winnipeg below them, Montreal ahead of Vancouver by 2 points. And the teams play tonight, and Calgary trailing Montreal by 3 points. So it's tight around the league. These divisions they're going to be very tough to win. They're getting to be a logjam here, but we're going to see a lot of good hockey over the next month into the trade deadline. Interesting to see what happens, but a lot of interesting teams still, and teams are going to miss the playoffs that you look at before the year and you're like, they should have made it. And some of that's due to divisional alignment. Just really good players, really good teams running into really good teams, and somebody's going to make it, somebody's not. So tough, but this year with COVID and everything, teams that make the playoffs are going to earn it. There's no asterisks, just like last year, Tampa won the cup in the bubble. They deserve that. The Lakers won the NBA championship in the bubble. There's no asterisks on that for me. I don't think it's the toughest title ever. I think that was one of the rumors, or that was a headline. I don't buy that, because I think traveling to games is a lot tougher than going to a hotel room and not moving. But there's no asterisks in this season and how it's being played. I'm going to get to some NBA down the line here. The Lakers win again last night. They're now 10-7 without Anthony Davis. Game and a half out of first place in the West. Toronto Raptors have been going through the ringer lately. They had 6 different players have COVID, and they've lost 6 straight now. They're 11th in the Eastern Conference. Again, they're only 4 games out of 5th, but it's getting to the time of year where every game counts, and they're starting to get players back, but they're a little sluggish from being out of shape, from having COVID. And Fred VanVleet came out and said that he wouldn't wish COVID on anyone. He had a really tough experience with it. So it's been tough on the Raptors lately, and we'll see what kind of backbone they have moving forward. We see Philadelphia and Brooklyn now tied at the top of the Eastern Conference. And you got teams like the Knicks and Charlotte in the playoffs in the East right now at the Atlanta Hawks. So just kind of seeing the changing of the guard where Indiana, Toronto, perennial playoff teams are on the outside looking in right now. Could they find it before the end of the year? Yes, but teams like the Raptors are going to have to do it quick. They got Utah Jazz tonight who have lost 2 straight. They're on a back-to-back, so good opportunity. But winning these games are important because, Atlanta's won 7 in a row. So they need to find their game here. We're in March. They still got some time, but games start slipping away, and you don't want to lose that. You don't want to lose too much ground before it's over, and especially with the trade deadline coming in just a few days in the NBA. And, last night, but really today is the start of March Madness, the NCAA tournament. The first 4 last night with the playing games, we saw Texas Southern move on. Just pull up my bracket here. We saw UCLA beat Michigan State in overtime. Saw Drake beat Wichita State. And we saw Norfolk State edge out Appalachian State. So it starts today, 1 o'clock. We'll see Virginia Tech and Florida. First game of the day. We will see some big games, of course. But this tournament, like I said with Ryder the other night, this tournament's so fun, and I love it. And we'll see what happens as we go along. But it's so much fun. It is truly madness. So who knows what's going to happen? But me and Ryder will be back next week. But just keep involved with the tournament. It's always on TV the next 4 days. It'll be on. If you tune in the afternoon, it's going to be on your screen on TSN, CBS, wherever you watch your sports. This tournament's going to be locked and loaded and have wall-to-wall coverage. So enjoy all of that. Later on today, I'm going to be doing an interview with my sister, aka Tally Warren. We're going to talk about her kind of moving up in hockey, playing boys hockey, switching to women's, her journey going to different schools, being a defenseman, being a defensive defenseman, how she's navigated those ropes to get opportunities or lack thereof. So that should be really cool. I'm looking forward to that later today. That'll be out tomorrow. So a lot's happening here to the point. Really appreciate the support to everybody who keeps listening. But I'll be back later today. But everybody, enjoy your weekends. Stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll talk soon.